His new fiancée had a $40,000 dress, a senator for a dad, and 400 guests watching her walk down the aisle. And then the doors opened on the wrong side of the tent. My name is Elena. I was 26 years old, 12 weeks pregnant, and carrying exactly $800 in my bank account when his mother handed me a check and told me to disappear. No scene. No argument. Just a check on the kitchen counter and a look on her face like she was tipping someone who had already overstayed their welcome. I took the money. I got in my car. And I drove away from that estate without looking back once. That was 4 years ago. Last Saturday I drove back. But I didn't go alone. I brought my 3 boys, 4 years old, dark wavy hair, and a pair of gray eyes that anyone who'd known Nathaniel Whitfield for 5 minutes would have recognized in an instant. I walked through those gates in a custom gown and diamonds I bought with my own money. And when those boys stepped out of that SUV onto the gravel of the estate their dad grew up on, the first sound I heard was a champagne glass shattering on the stone patio. His mom had dropped it. She hadn't been expecting me to look like that. She really hadn't been expecting them. Drop your city and the time it is right now in the comments. I want to know exactly who's watching this with me. And trust me, stay till the end. Because the wedding? That was just the beginning. The invitation showed up on a Thursday. I was standing in my kitchen, 38th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, when the mail arrived with this thick cream envelope. Kind of envelope that costs more than most people's grocery bills. And the second I smelled it, I knew exactly who sent it. Margaret Whitfield had a custom perfume. White roses and something sharp underneath, like money and old grudges. She'd worn it every single time she'd ever looked at me, like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. I stood there holding it for a long minute before I opened it. Nathaniel Whitfield and Clara Vandenberg request the honor of your presence at their wedding. I let out this breath, not really a laugh, not really a cry. Just the exhale of a woman who has been underestimated by the same people for the 4th time in a row. Nathaniel. My ex-husband. The man who slid divorce papers across our granite kitchen counter 4 years ago and never once looked me in the eye while he did it. Who stood completely silent while his mom, Margaret, handed me that settlement check like I was a bill she was finally getting around to paying. $60,000. For 3 years of my life. 3 years of loving someone who couldn't protect me from his own mother. Mama, who's the letter from? I looked down. Caleb, my oldest by exactly 3 minutes, was standing there tugging at my robe with both hands, looking up at me with those huge gray eyes. He's got his dad's hair and cheekbones. Got my mouth, though. That same set jaw look people have always said makes me look like I'm about to make a decision. Nobody important, baby, I told him. Go wake up your brothers. I listened to his little feet pound down the hallway. Then I walked to the kitchen and dropped the envelope on the island. My best friend Dana was already at the counter with her coffee and her iPad. Dana has been my right hand since I started the company. She's seen me close million-dollar deals in a hospital waiting room with a kid on my hip. She looked at that gold envelope and made this sound, somewhere between a laugh and pure outrage. Oh, no, she didn't. Oh, yes, she did. She invited you to his wedding. Dana picked it up. To watch. In person. Front row seat to my humiliation, I said. That's what she wants. She wants me to walk in there looking rough and worn down like I never got over it. She wants to prove she won. I poured my coffee. She has no idea. Dana looked at me. How much does she not know? And I smiled. Kind of smile I apparently only make right before I close something big. Dana told me later she knew the second she saw it that something was about to happen. She doesn't know about the company, I said. She doesn't know about the contracts. She doesn't know about the boys. I set my mug down. Margaret still thinks I'm the 26-year-old hostess she bought off and sent packing. She has no idea who I am now. I picked up the invitation. Clear the weekend. Call my stylist. I looked through the kitchen doorway at the living room, where 3 little boys in dinosaur pajamas were turning the couch cushions into a war zone. And call the tailor. I need 3 suits. Dana's jaw dropped. Elena. No. Dana. I turned around. If Margaret Whitfield wants a family reunion, it's time she met her grandsons. Here's what you need to understand before we get to that estate. When Nathaniel's mom pushed me out of that marriage, I had $800 to my name, a beater Honda with a cracked windshield, and a secret I hadn't told a single person. I was 3 months pregnant. Triplets. I found out 3 days before the divorce papers were signed. I didn't tell Nathaniel. I know how that sounds. But I had thought through every version of what would happen if Margaret found out, and every single version ended the same way. Lawyers. Custody battles. A family with unlimited money and zero mercy going after a broke single woman with no connections. Margaret would have gotten to those boys. She would have raised them to be exactly like her. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I left. I drove from Connecticut to Chicago in January. Alone. I cried for 2 days straight and then I stopped because I didn't have time anymore. I used $40,000 of that settlement check to rent a little office space and start a brand strategy company. I named it Reeves Strategic. I was running the whole thing out of a desk while I was showing, and then with infant car seats lined up against the wall behind me, and then with Caleb, Jordan, and Max in a pack-and-play 3 feet away while I was on client calls. I was exhausted in a way I still don't have the right words for. There were nights I sat on the bathroom floor and just cried because I was so tired and so scared. There were mornings I didn't know how I was going to get through the day. But I showed up every single morning. And the work was good. Really good. A regional retail chain hired me. Our campaign doubled their holiday revenue. Word spreads fast in that world when something actually works. A tech startup brought me in for a product launch. It blew up. Then a Fortune 500 company called. Then another one after that. And then another. Schwinn led to the next, and I stopped being surprised by it and just kept working. There were moments that felt like turning points. Campaign we built for a healthcare company that won an industry award and put Reeves Strategic on a national list. A partnership deal I closed on a phone call from a Chicago park bench while Max was asleep in his stroller and the other 2 were throwing rocks in the fountain, a deal that tripled our monthly revenue overnight. Small moments of pure disbelief, did that just actually happen, followed immediately by the boys needing a snack or a diaper change, which is honestly the best possible way to stay grounded. 18 months before that invitation arrived, Incorporated magazine named Reeves Strategic one of the top 5 branding agencies in the Midwest. We had 47 employees. My net worth had crossed $80 million and was still climbing. And the Whitfields? The family that had decided I wasn't good enough for their name? I'd had a research firm quietly tracking their financials for 6 months. Their real estate was mostly sold off. Their portfolio was in bad shape. The Greenwich estate, the big beautiful manor where Nathaniel grew up, had a second mortgage on it. Margaret was throwing charity galas on reputation that was slowly running out. She invited me to watch her celebrate. She had no idea she was handing me a front-row seat to her own reckoning. I have to stop right here and tell you one more thing before we get to that estate. On the flight from Chicago to Connecticut, I wasn't angry. I want you to understand that. I had burned through anger about 2 years in, somewhere around 2 a.m. with cold coffee and 3 sick babies and a pitch deck due at 8 a.m. Anger takes too much energy. I needed every bit of energy I had. What I felt on that flight was something different. Something quieter and much more dangerous than anger. It's the feeling you get when you've already won and you're just showing up for the other side to find out. I wasn't flying to Connecticut to make a scene. I was flying there because Margaret Whitfield had personally, in her own handwriting on her custom cream stationery, invited me into the room. And I had a team. I had brought my lead attorney, Ashley Graves, a Chicago litigator who had never once lost a custody case in 12 years and who, when I called her 6 months earlier and described the situation, had said, Elena, I have been waiting my whole career for a case like this. Ashley had 2 envelopes in her briefcase that Saturday. One was a co-parenting framework she drafted on the off chance this day came. The other was a file she and I had been building quietly for over a year. Court records, financial documents, sworn statements from former Whitfield household staff, and one audio recording that, if it ever reached the right desk in the right government office, would create problems for Margaret Whitfield that no amount of family money could fix. "You sure about today?" Ashley asked at the gate at O'Hare. I watched my boys tear down the jet bridge and said, "She started it." Ashley smiled. She loves her job. We flew private. I know how that sounds. 4 years ago I drove away with a cracked windshield and $800. Now I'm pulling up to the Whitfield estate in Greenwich in a black Escalade that's part of a 3-vehicle convoy, wearing a champagne gold gown that took my stylist 3 weeks to put together and diamonds at my throat that I picked out myself. But here's the thing, it wasn't about showing off. I genuinely don't care about any of that stuff. Penthouse, the cars, the gown, none of it means anything to me the way my boys do, the way the work does. I wore it because Margaret Whitfield had spent 3 years trying to make me feel small. And I needed her in the first 5 seconds to understand exactly how badly she had miscalculated me. On the plane, I sat across from my 3 little guys. Caleb, my serious one, the observer. He watches a room before he says a word, and when he does say something, it cuts right to the heart of whatever's happening. Jordan, funny, loud, the one who can get anyone smiling inside of 60 seconds. And Max, quiet, soft until he's decided something, and then absolutely immovable. All 3 of them with those stormy gray eyes and that dark wavy hair. All 3 of them completely, obviously, undeniably Nathaniel's kids. I'd spent 2 evenings getting them ready. We're going to a big party. There'll be lots of grown-ups. We stay together. We're polite. If someone asks who you are, you say your name. Caleb had looked at me and said, "Is this about the sad man in the photo? The one in the back of your drawer?" I stared at him. "You've seen that photo? You look at it sometimes when you think we're sleeping." I held it together for about 4 seconds. Then I grabbed all 3 of them and hugged them so tight that Jordan yelped and said, "Mama, my ribs." Now, in the Escalade rolling toward those estate gates, I smoothed down their little velvet lapels. Caleb in midnight navy, Jordan in burgundy, Max in forest green. They looked like the world's most dignified tiny gentlemen. The guard at the gate checked his clipboard. "I have an Elena Reeves on the shuttle list from public parking area B." "Course you do, Margaret." I lowered my window. "Open the gate." Not a question. He opened it. We pulled straight to the VIP entrance. The good entrance. Bentleys and town cars, senators and old money. Convoy stopped. The door opened. I stepped out first. Sunglasses. Posture. Completely unhurried. Then I turned back and held out my hand. "Come on, boys, one at a time." 3 small figures in velvet suits hopped out onto the gravel. The lawn went quiet. You have to understand what that looked like. Nathaniel's family, his family friends, people who had known him since he was a little kid, they were staring at 3 4-year-old boys with his hair, his eyes, his exact bone structure. Like someone had found photos of Nathaniel from preschool and they had just walked off the paper. And then I heard it. The sound of a champagne glass hitting stone from somewhere up on the terrace. Margaret had dropped hers. "Okay. I need you to stay with me right here." Because what happened inside that tent, in front of 400 people, including 2 U.S. senators, a federal judge, and half of Connecticut's old guard, is the part one still can't fully believe happened in real life. A 4-year-old is about to say 7 words that bring an entire wedding to a dead stop. And the thing about little kids is they have absolutely no idea when they're dropping a bomb. If this story is hitting you, share it right now. Send it to someone who needs to hear it tonight. And drop a comment, just your city and what time it is where you are. I want to know who's with me. Margaret came at me fast. She crossed that lawn in 4-inch heels with the energy of a woman who had spent 60 years getting her way and was not about to start losing now. Full pearls, Chanel suit, face perfectly composed except for this furious trembling around the edges that all the money in the world couldn't smooth out. She stopped right in front of me and dropped her voice to this tight, hissing whisper. "What is the meaning of this? I put you at a table near the catering entrance. Not here. Not this." Her eyes moved to the boys, and for just a flicker of a second, the fury cracked. What replaced it wasn't something she wanted me to see. "Margaret," I said. "You look stressed." "New surgeon?" Her face went crimson. "Get out. Take those boys and leave before I have you removed." "I have an RSVP confirmation on my phone," I said. "You personally sent me this invitation. And if your security guards put hands on me or my kids in front of this crowd," I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't have to. I will file suit before you finished your champagne toast. And this time I have the money to see it through." She glanced around. Senator. Judge. News cameras. Too many witnesses. She didn't move. And that's when Nathaniel appeared. He came around the corner of the tent in his navy tux, looking for his mom, and then he saw me. Top dead. And then his eyes moved to the boys. All the blood left his face. Max, who had been calmly staring at Nathaniel since he appeared, tugged on my gown. He tilted his head to one side, this exact gesture Nathaniel always made, like his neck couldn't quite hold the weight of his thoughts, and said, loud enough for the 6 rows nearest us to hear clearly, "Mama, that man looks like me." 400 people did not breathe. I looked down at Max. "I see that, baby." I took his hand. "Let's find our seats." I walked directly to the front row. VIP section. Immediate family only. A very nervous young usher materialized in my path. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry, this section is for immediate family," I finished. I looked down at my 3 boys, then back at him. "I don't think you'll find anyone in this tent more directly related to the groom than his own children." I sat down, crossed my ankles. Then the program. The usher backed away slowly. The ceremony started. Clara walked down the aisle in a beautiful gown, her dad beaming, her bouquet shaking just slightly. She was gorgeous. She also knew within about 15 steps that something was badly wrong, because nobody was watching her. They were watching the front row. She reached the altar. Nathaniel took her hands. His were soaked. The officiant started talking. Nathaniel kept his eyes forward by pure force of will. Then Jordan, who had been impressively patient for 11 whole minutes, looked up at me and said in the conversational volume of a 4-year-old who has never once considered that there might be situations requiring a quieter voice, "Mama, I'm hungry. Can I have a snack?" Soft laughter rippled through the nearest rows. I had absolutely planned for this. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a little bag of crackers. Crunch when Jordan bit into the first one echoed in the silence like a starter pistol. Nathaniel's best man turned away so nobody would see him trying not to laugh. Margaret made a sharp signal to the security guard standing in the shadows. I saw him start walking toward us. I stood up. The whole tent thought I was about to object to the wedding. You could feel 400 people hold their breath at the same exact moment. "Nathaniel." My voice was completely calm. Carried perfectly. "Your mom is sending security to remove your children from your wedding. I just want to make sure that's a decision you've made yourself, because every person here is watching you make it." Clara let go of Nathaniel's hands. "Children." The word came out like it had broken on the way out of her mouth. "What children?" "She's lying." Margaret was on her feet. "She is a desperate, manipulative." "She is not lying." New voice. From the back of the tent. Everyone turned. A tall man with silver hair was walking calmly down the center aisle. maybe 65, the kind of posture that says I have never once been unsure of myself in public. His name was Dr. Raymond Calloway, Nathaniel's uncle on his mom's side, a retired geneticist from Johns Hopkins, and the one Whitfield who had kept his distance from Margaret's world for years. He'd arrived late, parked in the back lot, and seen my boys on the way in. He walked straight to the front row and crouched down in front of the triplets, studying each of their faces with this calm, scientific attention. Then he stood up and turned to face the tent. "There is a genetic marker in the Whitfield bloodline," he said. Clear, unhurried, the voice of a man giving testimony. A partial arc of gold pigmentation in the left iris. My grandfather had it. My father had it. I have it. Nathaniel has it. He paused. These 3 boys have it. "Show him, Caleb," I said softly. Caleb blinked up into the light. The gold arc in his left eye was unmistakable. Clara Vandenberg, in her beautiful gown with her beautiful bouquet, turned to Nathaniel. Her voice was very quiet. "You have 3 sons. Triplets. And you never told me." "I didn't know," Nathaniel said. He was crying. "Clara, I swear I didn't know." "He couldn't have known," I said. "Because when I left 4 years ago I was pregnant and terrified, and his mom had just finished explaining to me exactly how unworthy I was of this family. I knew that if Margaret found out about those babies, she would use every lawyer and every dollar available to take them from me. So I protected them the only way I knew how. I looked right at Margaret. And I wasn't wrong, was I?" Margaret said nothing. Silence is an answer. Clara looked at her dad, Senator Vandenberg, who had gone from beaming father of the bride to absolutely volcanic in about 45 seconds. Then she looked back at Nathaniel. She took her veil off. "I can't do this," she said, just barely above a whisper. "Mom." "Get the car." Senator Vandenberg grabbed Nathaniel by the lapels with both hands and shoved him back a step. "You have humiliated my daughter. In front of 400 witnesses." "My boys are not illegitimate," I said, calm and clear. "They were born during a legal marriage. They are rightful heirs under Connecticut law. My attorneys are fully prepared on this." Margaret made this choked sound, like the air going out of something that had been holding a lot of pressure for a long time. Clara gathered her train and walked back up the aisle. Her parents followed. Half the guests already had their phones out. And Nathaniel stood alone at the altar, staring at 3 little boys in velvet suits who were calmly eating crackers in the front row, mostly unconcerned. Jordan gave him a little wave. Nathaniel put his face in his hands. "Okay. I have to just stop for a second. If you've been where Elena was, if anyone has ever written you off, counted you out, handed you a check and told you to go away, drop a thumbs up in the comments right now. And real talk, if this story is doing something for you tonight, share it. Text it to your friend. Post it. Somebody in your life needs to watch this, especially the part that's coming next. Because the wedding chaos? That was just the appetizer. What happened 3 days later is the part one still can't believe. Like the video, subscribe to Silent Revenge and let's keep going. By Sunday morning it was everywhere. Whitfield wedding disaster, secret triplets revealed at ceremony. The photos of me stepping out of that Escalade, the gown, the boys, Margaret's face as the champagne glass hit the stone, were on every gossip site in the country. My phone did not stop going off. I turned it face down and went back to reviewing client contracts. 3 days later, I got served. Margaret and Nathaniel had filed an emergency custody petition. It was aggressive, it was expensive, and it accused me of parental alienation, deliberate fraud, and emotional harm, essentially arguing that I was an unfit mother for keeping the boys' existence secret. Case was weak. Margaret knew it was weak. That wasn't the point. Margaret's strategy had always been the same: throw money at problems until the other person runs out of fight. She'd hired the most cutthroat firm in Hartford, Hargrove, Blackwell, and Crane, specifically because their billing rates alone were designed to bleed defendants dry. They want a war of attrition, Ashley said on the phone that night. Then let's end it fast, I told her. Book a conference room. Wednesday. Tell them I'll come to them. The boardroom at Hargrove Blackwell was meant to intimidate. Leather chairs. Mahogany table. The whole setup designed to make the other side feel like they're at a disadvantage before anyone said a word. I walked in Wednesday morning in an all-white suit that I had picked out specifically for this meeting, because I have learned from years of negotiations that how you walk into a room is the first statement you make before you open your mouth. Margaret was at the head of the table. Pearls, Chanel, the full armor. Nathaniel sat at the far end, unshaven, rumpled, a man who looked like he hadn't slept properly in a week. He looked terrible, honestly. He also looked like someone who had finally stopped performing, and I didn't know what to do with that yet. The lead attorney, Marcus Hargrove, silver-haired, smooth, the kind of man who has used condescension as a professional tool for 40 years, opened with, "Miss Reeves, do you admit that you deliberately concealed 3 children from their biological father?" I protected my kids from a home environment with a thoroughly documented history of psychological abuse, I said. I slid a red folder across the table. Public court records. Margaret's divorce filings from 1994. Sworn testimony from 3 former household staff members. And an affidavit from a woman named Rosa Alcantara. Nathaniel's head came up. "Rosa was your nanny," I told him. "From when you were about 4 until you were 9. You loved her. She left suddenly and you were told she quit." "She left because I cried too much," Nathaniel said very quietly. "That's what Mom told me. She left because Margaret fired her after she reported that Margaret had locked you in the library for 6 hours as punishment for breaking a window." I didn't look at Margaret when I said it. I kept my eyes on Nathaniel. Rosa kept records. She's been looking for the right moment to submit them for 12 years. Color in Nathaniel's face went flat. "This is defamation," Hargrove started. "It's a sworn affidavit. Take it to a judge." I reopened my folder. I should also mention, my financial team completed a review of the Whitfield estate holdings last month as part of a real estate acquisition review. The Greenwich estate is carrying about $4.3 million in secured debt. The investment portfolio is down 34% over the last fiscal year. The last major commercial properties sold in 2021. I looked at Margaret directly. "You don't want those boys because you love them. You want access to the trust distributions from Nathaniel's grandfather's estate, which under the will go to his biological grandchildren if they live under Whitfield guardianship. You need their money, Margaret. Because yours is running out." The room went completely quiet. Nathaniel slowly turned to look at his mom. "Is that true?" he said. She didn't answer. Which was the answer? "Here is my offer," I said, and I spoke directly to Nathaniel. Not Hargrove, not Margaret. Just him. "Drop this petition today. Sign the co-parenting framework Ashley has prepared. You get visits in Chicago, your travel, your hotel, my terms, starting immediately. No overnight stays until the boys are comfortable. No Margaret involved in any capacity." I paused. "You do that and you get to be their dad. That's the deal." Nathaniel's eyes were red. "And if I don't?" "Then we go to court, a judge reads this red folder, and we also discuss the audio recording that's in there. The one from a phone call between Margaret and a Connecticut state official about a very large, very illegal political donation made in exchange for favorable zoning decisions." Margaret's face went white. She remembered that call. She remembered every word she'd said on it. "Sign it, Mom," Nathaniel said quietly. He stood up from his chair. It was the first time in that room he'd moved with any kind of decision behind it. "We're done. I want to know my kids." He looked at her. "Sign the papers." Margaret's hand was shaking when she picked up the pen. I gathered my documents, buttoned my blazer, and walked to the door. "One more thing, Margaret," I said. I didn't turn around. I bought the note on the second mortgage on the Greenwich estate last week. Technically, you're living in my house now. A short pause. I'm not in any hurry on that. Just keep the landscaping looking good. My heels on the marble hallway floor were the cleanest sound I have ever heard in my life. 3 weeks later. My living room. 9 a.m. The boys had already destroyed it. Lego pieces across the rug. Art supplies somehow on the coffee table and the windowsill. A couch cushion on the floor for no clear reason. Completely standard Saturday morning. I was at the kitchen counter pretending to read a contract. I was actually watching the elevator. Floor 34. Floor 35. Is he coming yet? Jordan asked from the floor without looking up from the train track he was building. Almost. What if he's weird? Caleb said. He was sitting on the back of the couch, balanced perfectly, completely casual about it. He might be a little weird, I said honestly. He's nervous. Give him a break. I'm not good at giving breaks, Max announced. I know, buddy. Try anyway. The elevator chimed. Nathaniel stepped into the foyer. He looked so different from the man at that altar. Tux was gone. He was in jeans and a plain dark crewneck, carrying 3 gift bags. His hair wasn't perfectly styled. He looked like someone who had stayed up late thinking about what to say and hadn't landed on anything yet. He saw me first. Then his eyes moved past me to the living room, and he saw all 3 of them, all 3 boys looking at him at the same time with those big gray eyes, and his face did this thing I can't fully describe. Like walking into a room and realizing for the first time how much you've been missing. Hey, he said. His voice came out smaller than he intended. Shoes off, I said. We don't wear outside shoes in the house. He fumbled with his shoes like he'd never taken them off before in his life. Jordan walked right up to him, arms crossed, completely unimpressed. You're the guy from the wedding. The one who was crying. Nathaniel opened his mouth. Closed it. Yeah, he said. That was me. Why were you crying? A long pause. Because I found out I had missed something really, really important, Nathaniel said. And he did something I did not expect. He got down on one knee so he was at their level. Margaret Whitfield had raised her son never to kneel before anyone. And here he was on his knee on my rug, eye to eye with a 4-year-old. I brought you something. He held out the gift bags. The boys looked at me. I nodded. Inside, hand-painted wooden model sailboats. Beautiful. Fragile. Clearly meant to be displayed on a shelf somewhere important. Very obviously not toys. Jordan immediately used his as a race car on the floor. A little piece snapped off. I watched Nathaniel's face. His first instinct was clearly to say be careful. He'd been raised in a house where things didn't get touched, let alone broken. He caught himself. Those are supposed to break, he said, not entirely convincingly. So we can practice fixing them. You know how to fix stuff? Jordan asked. I could probably learn, Nathaniel said. I have glue. Max screamed and sprinted for the art supplies drawer. And that was it. That was how Nathaniel Whitfield, heir to the Whitfield name, man who grew up in a house where children were seen and not heard, ended up sitting cross-legged on my living room floor covered in craft glue, with 3 loud, chaotic, beautiful boys climbing all over him. He was awkward. He used vocabulary that went right over their heads. He flinched every time someone made a sudden loud noise. When Caleb crawled into his lap and just stayed there, staring up at him, Nathaniel froze completely, like someone had handed him something so precious he was afraid to breathe wrong. He stayed for 4 hours. I made grilled cheese for lunch. All 5 of us sat at the kitchen island, the boys talking over each other at maximum volume, Nathaniel eating about half a sandwich and spending the other 30 minutes just watching them with this look on his face that I recognized. It was the look of someone who is finally understanding the full size of what they lost. They have your nose, he said to me over the noise. They have your stubbornness, I said back. Fair trade. He was quiet for a second. My mom is alone in that house. The staff is basically gone. All the social connections pulled back after the wedding blew up. He looked at his hands. She built her whole life around power. And she ended up with no one. I didn't say anything to that. It wasn't my place. I was weak, he said. 4 years. I just let her run everything. Run me. He looked at the boys. Jordan was trying to balance a spoon on his nose, Max was coaching him, Caleb was watching both of them with patient skepticism. I missed all of it. First words. First steps. All of it. Because I was too busy being exactly what she needed me to be. You're here now, I said. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the truth. Don't make promises to them you can't keep, I told him. Don't tell them you'll always be here if you're not sure. Just promise them next Saturday. I promise next Saturday, he said. No hesitation. After lunch, the boys crashed hard. Nap time hits like a wall at that age. One by one, they wilted. I picked up Jordan. Nathaniel, moving with this careful, terrified tenderness, scooped up Caleb. Caleb put his head right down on Nathaniel's shoulder and was asleep in about 30 seconds. Nathaniel stood completely still in the hallway holding his sleeping son. I watched a single tear go down his face. He pulled Caleb just a little bit closer, the way you hold something you almost lost for good. We tucked them in. Nathaniel stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the blankets move with their breathing. Thank you, he said in the hallway. Quietly. For not keeping them from me today. You had every right to. I didn't do it for you, I told him gently. I did it for them. Every kid deserves to know where they come from, even if they end up choosing a different path. He nodded. The elevator, he put his shoes back on, still covered in dried craft glue, hair a mess, exhausted in the best way. He looked more like a real person than he had in the 4 years I'd known him. Same time next week, he asked. I looked at him for a moment. Next time bring Legos, I said. They think the boats are boring. He laughed. A real laugh, surprised out of him, genuine, the laugh of someone who just got a little piece of something back. The elevator doors closed. I walked to the window and looked out at Lake Michigan. Gray and wide and beautiful. 4 years ago I left with nothing but fear and 3 heartbeats and a decision to refuse to stay small. I didn't need to beat the Whitfields. I just needed to become someone they couldn't diminish. And I did. I walked back to my kitchen, opened my laptop, and pulled up the Q4 projections. Company wasn't going to run itself. Here's what happened after. Nathaniel didn't miss a single Saturday. Not one. 6 months later, he moved to Chicago permanently, apartment 8 blocks from us, close enough to be present, far enough to be appropriate. He's learning. He's genuinely trying. He's not a perfect dad. But he's a real one, and my boys know the difference. Clara Vandenberg went back to her career as an attorney in Washington, D.C. About 6 months after the wedding, I got a handwritten card in the mail. It said, "You didn't ruin my wedding. You saved my life. I hope you know that." I kept it. Margaret stayed in the Greenwich estate. Alone on an allowance that Nathaniel manages. She never asked to meet the boys. He stopped pushing for it. Some things are just done. Dr. Raymond Calloway, Nathaniel's uncle, started sending the boys birthday cards from Baltimore. He included little science experiment kits. Caleb wrote him back in painstaking 4-year-old printing. "Dear Dr. Raymond, the volcano kitty exploded on Max. He is okay. Love, Caleb." Raymond told Nathaniel he framed it. Dana got promoted to COO at Reeves Strategic and took an equity stake. She's also engaged now to a woman she met at a client dinner in New York. She called me before she told her family. Reeves' strategic crossed $50 million in annual revenue. I was in Forbes. I was asked to give a talk at a business conference. I wore a burnt orange dress and talked about what it means to build something from nothing. I didn't talk about the Whitfields. I talked about a January night in an empty apartment in Chicago, alone, terrified, with 3 heartbeats and a laptop and a refusal to disappear. I said this, and I mean every word of it. The most powerful thing you will ever do is become so completely, undeniably yourself that the people who tried to reduce you become irrelevant. Not defeated. Not punished. Just irrelevant. You stop needing them to understand what you're worth. You already know. I got a standing ovation. In the front row, Caleb, Jordan, and Max sat in their little blazers, sharing a bag of crackers, completely unbothered by any of it. Max leaned over to Jordan and whispered, loudly enough for the first 3 rows to hear, "Is this almost done? I'm starving." Nathaniel, sitting next to them, put his hand over his mouth. And I caught his eye from the podium. I didn't smile at him. Not quite. Not exactly. But I nodded. And some things, after everything, a nod says it all. That's why this channel is called Silent Revenge. 'Cause the loudest revenge makes no sound at all. It's a gown you bought with your own money. 3 boys in velvet suits on a gravel drive. A red folder slid across a conference table. Your ex-mother-in-law's mortgage in your name. It's a life so full and real and built on your own terms that the people who once tried to define you become nothing more than a footnote. If this story meant something to you tonight, and I believe it did, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that like button. I know. But genuinely, every like is how this story reaches the next person who needs it. Don't skip it. Second, leave a comment. Your city. Time it is right now. What part hit you hardest? Have you ever been written off by someone who had no idea what you were building? Tell me. I read every single one. Third, subscribe and ring that bell. I put a new story up every week. Next week I'm telling you about a man who got pushed out of his own company by his board of directors, so he came back as a janitor to find out exactly who did it. And then handled it accordingly. You do not want to miss that one. This is Silent Revenge. The best endings don't announce themselves. They just show up. I want to add something here because I get messages from people all the time who are at the very beginning of their own version of this. And I think there's something important I left out. When I drove away from that Connecticut estate with $800 and a cracked windshield and a secret I couldn't tell anyone, I did not have a plan. I want to be completely honest about that. There was no 5-year strategy. No big vision board. No master plan for buying Margaret's mortgage back or walking into a conference room with a red folder. I was just trying to make it to the next gas station without falling apart. The first year in Chicago was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. There were weeks I genuinely didn't know how rent was going to happen. I had a big client cancel on me right around the time the boys turned 6 months old, and I remember sitting on the kitchen floor that night, spreadsheet open on my laptop, boys finally asleep down the hall, thinking, what if I actually can't do this? I called my mom. She lives in Phoenix. We've always been close, even at a distance. She picked up on the second ring even though it was midnight her time, and she said, Elena, you have been figuring things out since before I could keep up with you. This is no different. My mom. Honestly, I don't think I would have made it through that first year without her. She flew to Chicago twice to help with the boys when I had back-to-back deadlines. She never said I told you so, not once, even though she'd had her doubts about Nathaniel's family from the very beginning. She just showed up, made food, played with the babies, and told me I was doing great even when I obviously wasn't. Every kid should be so lucky to have someone like her in their corner. I know I was. I bring that up because the version of this story that goes around the internet, the gown, the estate, the red folder in the conference room, that looks like a movie. But the actual story is 3 years of completely unglamorous, grinding, exhausting, relentless showing up. It's driving to the pediatrician alone at 7 a.m. with all 3 kids because Max has a 104 fever and you still have a client call at 9. It's rewriting a pitch deck at 11 p.m. because the first version just isn't good enough. It's the Tuesday nights when nothing dramatic happened at all. No win, no breakthrough, just you and the work and the quiet apartment and the decision to get up and try again tomorrow. That's the real story. The gown is just the cover. I wanted you to know that part too. People always ask me what my kids know. Whether I've told them. They're 5 now. Caleb, Jordan, and Max just had their birthday last month. We threw a party at Navy Pier in Chicago, about $200, way too much blue frosting, and 3 boys running around in the absolute wind off the lake absolutely losing their minds. It was the best day I've had in a long time. They know their dad is Nathaniel. They know he lives a few blocks away, comes over on Saturdays, takes them to the Natural History Museum on special days. Jordan is currently deeply in love with the dinosaur exhibit, specifically one particular T-Rex skeleton that he has, for reasons none of us have been able to crack, decided to name Big Steve. Nathaniel takes him to see Big Steve approximately once a month and does not complain about it even slightly, which I think is genuinely one of the nicest things about who he's becoming. They know their grandma on my side is Grammy in Phoenix, who sends cookie packages and calls every Sunday night without fail. They don't know the whole story yet. They're 5. They shouldn't have to carry any of that weight right now. But someday they'll ask. And I'm going to tell them everything, all of it honestly, in a way that's right for wherever they are when they ask. I'll tell them their dad made some hard choices and then he showed up and kept showing up. I'll tell them that their grandmother on his side made different choices and those had real consequences, and that you can leave space for people to change without leaving the door open to be hurt the same way twice. And I'll tell them that their mom drove west in January with nothing but fear and stubbornness and love, and built something from scratch with her own 2 hands. I'll tell them that nobody gets to decide what you're worth except you. That the people who write you off with a check and a dismissive look are only ever showing you something about themselves. That the best move, always every time, is to go get quiet, do the work, become so undeniable that their opinion of you stops mattering, and let the results speak for themselves. Caleb, Jordan, Max, if you ever find this when you're old enough to look, I love you more than anything I have ever built. You 3 were the whole reason. Everything I did in those years I did because of you. Also, Jordan, Big Steve is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. That is his name. I'm sorry, but it's not negotiable. Last thing. I mean it this time. You might be watching this from a place that feels like the beginning of something really scary. Like everything just blew up. Like someone just handed you a check and told you to go away quietly. Like the people who were supposed to have your back didn't. Like you're looking at a future that feels completely overwhelming and unclear. I've been there. I have been specifically there. What I know now on the other side of it is this. The story is not over. The story is almost never actually over at the moment it feels like it is. What feels like an ending is almost always just the part right before you find out what you are actually made of. Get in the car. Drive west if you have to. Find your apartment and your spreadsheet and your cold coffee. Call your mom. And then get to work. The rest follows. I promise you the rest follows. It just doesn't show up on your timeline. It shows up on its own schedule after you've done the quiet work nobody sees. So do the work. Trust the timeline. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you are finished. This is silent revenge. The best endings don't announce themselves. They just arrive.